is playing a certain game. And in our culture, because our culture is so heavily based on win-lose games, this little voice is a voice that tries to avoid losing. And at the same time as that, it's always trying to present itself in the most favorable light for everybody else. And when we're listening to other people, we're listening to them through the filter of that little voice. And I first became aware of this when I worked with a group of people, the Madhu Manjilajara people of the Great Sandy Desert in Western Australia. These were amongst the last Aboriginal people to lead a fully traditional way of life. And I was out there working with these people through an education program. And I at first thought, when I'd ask a question, that no one had heard the question, or they'd just refused to answer the question. But I later learned that what they were doing was they were practicing a technique that they call pinakari. Now, pinakari, in the Madhu Manjilajara language, literally means ears up. It's what kangaroos do when they pay attention. And when a kangaroo pays attention, the attention is total. It's not filtering anything through an interior being. It's being 100% present. And one of the things that we learned working out with these people is that we, as a Dragon Dreaming project, brought Jean Houston to Western Australia. Now, Jean is interesting because she and her husband had the only legal supply of LSD in the United States for 30 years, because she wrote the definitive study on the psychotropic effects of LSD for the US government. And she was employed too by the United States Space Program, because what they found was that the 17 men who went to the moon, all of them returned to the Earth with a permanent personality change. And NASA was interested to find out why. And what Jean discovered was that this personality change was a result of what they call now the overview effect. As Edgar Mitchell told Jean, it was not going to the moon that was important. It was coming back to Earth. And for 3 days, he said, we just saw the Earth in front of us slowly growing bigger as we traveled closer and closer from the moon. And he said, Jean, it was like falling in love, but outwards rather than inwards. And he said, it's changed me forever, and it's changed the others forever. It's a little bit like what Joanna Macy talks about in terms of the great turning and about seeing the world with new eyes. Anyway, Jean was interested in going out and meeting Aboriginal people. And we took her out into the desert, and she met a traditional Aboriginal woman. And Jean was talking with this Aboriginal woman and said, you know, we have 5 senses. And the Aboriginal woman said, 5? And Jean said, yes, we can see, we can hear, we can smell, we can taste, and we can touch. And the Aboriginal woman said, that explains a lot. We Aboriginal people have hundreds of senses. Now, pinakari is a process that we use in Dragon Dreaming to put you in touch with some of these extra senses that we've got, that we're probably not consciously aware of at the time. Now, in pinakari, it's a process that lasts about 3 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes. And I advise everyone who is online and who's available while we wait for the others to come on board, first of all, to shut their eyes because we get so much of our information through our eyes that it drowns out the other senses. So if everyone would like to shut their eyes. And now, I want you to become aware of your weight pushing in the chair that you're sitting in, and the weight of your legs on the floor. What you're feeling now is the oldest force in the universe. It's the force of gravity. And it's always present, and it's always holding us. Now, it's holding us so we don't float off into space. It's holding us to the earth. And if it was a person who was always there, always holding us in this way, we would call that unconditional love. So I want you to imagine right now, this second, that in this way the earth is loving you unconditionally. Aboriginal people say through Pinakari, it's so powerful that you can literally hear the song of the earth. So that's the start of Pinakari. Second thing, I want you all to take a breath. And I want you to hear the sound of your breathing. It's another one of these senses. The sound of our breath. It's always there. If you listen truly to the sound of your breath, you will hear it makes two notes. There's a high note on the inhale and a low note on the exhale. Now, scientists have proven that these two notes are unique. It's like being two notes in a song. And it's a song that keeps us alive. We can go 40 days without food. We can go 4 days without water. But we can't go 4 minutes without a breath. 17/18 of the energy you live by comes from your breath. Now I want to put you in touch with another sense. I want you to become aware that as you're breathing in, the air is a little bit cooler than the air that you breathe out. See if you can feel that difference in temperature. That temperature difference comes from the sun, through the food you've just eaten. We are powered by solar energy. Now, a fourth sense that you might not be aware of. I want you to be aware, see if you can cultivate the awareness that when you breathe in, the air is a little bit drier than when you breathe out. It's a little bit moister with the exhale than it is with the inhale. That difference is caused by the fact that 70% of your body is water. And there is not a single drop of that water that was in your body a month ago. We replace all of the water in our body 26 times a year. So when you breathe in, when does that inhale stop being part of the world and start being part of you? Is it when it goes in through your nostrils? Or is it when it reaches the lining of your lungs? Or when it passes from your lungs into your blood? Or from the blood into the cells of your body? And when you breathe out, when does that exhale stop being part of you? Is it when it goes into the blood from the cells? Or is it when it passes from the blood into the lining of your lungs? Or travels out through your nose? Does it ever stop being a part of you? The boundary is artificial. We are part of the earth in this way. And what we do to the earth, ultimately we're doing to ourselves. Now, if you've been practicing Pinakari like this, you may be able even to hear the beating of your heart. You can probably feel it with the different cells in your body. If you're really doing this well, you may even hear the squeak of the blood as it passes through your ears. That heartbeat began 19 days after you were conceived in this lifetime. And it'll be with you till you take your latest breath this lifetime. And if you've done this, as I've explained it, see if you can feel the energy moving around in your body and find where that energy is strongest. It may be that you're holding a little bit of tension there. Different people hold their tension in different parts of the body. And that tension is called tension because it really is a tension. It's holding a muscle in a state of permanent contraction. So see if you can breathe into that tension and consciously relax that part of the body. And if we've done this properly, you will find that you have temporarily silenced the little voice in the head, and you're able to be here and now with a greater degree of attention. So, now I'm going to get you to open your eyes, and you may notice something. You may notice that colours are a little bit more vibrant, and sound is a little bit clearer. The reason why is because that little voice occupies a great deal of processing space in your brain. And because you've silenced that little voice temporarily, you can see more clearly. and hear more clearly. Thank you all. Pinakari.
Thank you, John. And thank you everyone that have decided to join us today. Have a few more people joining. Virgilio joined as well, I saw. And we have different people from all over the world. And the conversation, the theme of the conversation that we wanted to bring was around stories and stories to heal the world. And I want to bring a question and just thank maybe at this point, John, and also the wisdom of the Aboriginal people that you are transmitting to us through that invitation to be listening deeply to ourselves and to the living wonder that we are, the living wonder that we live in and we are part of. And when we prepared for this, I asked you about the stories that can heal the world, and I'm now realizing is yeah, that the stories and it's a way to enter into a space, and it's so beautiful how you open up and practice like Pinakari through a story, and how the stories are opening the space, and this is healing. This is healing. So I feel you already answered it. So bringing the story and bringing the practice through that. But I wonder if I can bring back this question. What stories do we need to help us heal the world? Or why heal the world? Maybe first of all. What's healing? And yeah. And I invite people to share also how they're feeling at the point, and as so bring on questions. We will have a time for questions and a time for breakout sessions as well. So we are 34 people, 50 people registered. So it's going to be hard to do a conversation with all of us at the same time. But through the chat, we can bring in our questions and our comments, and I'll try to bring that into the conversation. As well, we will have a moment to connect with each other as well. Yeah, so the first question, what stories do we need to heal the world?
I would like to start with a question even before that, and to consider the question for the need for us to find a new story. You know, storytelling is how humans create the capacity to imagine things that don't yet exist. And storytelling is a characteristic that defines us as human beings. It's something that is exclusive to humans. And we've been telling stories for about 2 million years. Because stories have an effect. The story you tell can reinforce belief. For example, the belief that you're not good enough or you're not smart enough. And then you live out of that space. It's linked to that little voice in the head. And stories actually create belief. The moment with the coronavirus. There's a lot of fake news conspiracy theories flying around, and they actually attract believers. But at the same time as this, it's been found that stories actually create empathy. The cultures that value storytelling are among the most empathic cultures on the earth. Because stories put information and imagination together. And the stories you tell say a lot about yourself. For example, a lot of people talk about the idea of abundance. And abundance comes from the Greek, meaning no limit. But abundance doesn't live in the real world. We live on a finite planet, so there are limits. But abundance exists in the imagination, in the world of story. For example, there is a story that I'd like to share with you about a rich king who had 2 daughters. One of his daughters was called Truth, and the other daughter was called Story. And the sisters were always in competition. And one day they decided upon a decisive competition. It would be to walk through the town and see who would attract the biggest crowd. Truth went first. But even when she decided to walk through the town naked and expose her true self, people still shut their doors. And she returned home to her sister crying. Story said, "Let us walk together." And the crowds gathered. The moral of the story is, no one really likes to hear the truth. Even worse when it is the naked truth. But when truth is wrapped in story, people gather and listen. Thank you.
Yeah, very powerful. Truth is hard to hear, and it's hard to hear the truth, and the more stronger it is, the stronger it is somehow to the resistance. And I think a lot of people here come also from the Conflict Transformation Summit that is happening, and other people from different parts. And I think many people in this room, through different practices, have been working in communities or have been engaged in change making, or at least change dreaming. and I think and when in the conversation before we spoke about the Great Turning from John Amacy, and it's such a beautiful story, and at the same time it is happening, and also it's not happening. We can see that we have great opportunities in this stopping down, slowing down, and at the same time something else is rising. Sort of it feels like there is this almost like a war of stories, I don't know, or a conflict of stories. Yeah, I wonder what's your feeling about this, the different stories that we are living right now in this moment.
Yes, it's a very good question. We know that Joanna Macy talks about the Great Turning, but there is a book written by a man called David Corton called The Great Turning. It's subtitled From Empire to Earth Community. And David Corton, his first book was called When Corporations Rule the World. They're both very good books to get hold of. And David Corton said in his book, The Great Turning, that he acknowledges that he got the title from Joanna Macy. He said there's a new story that's emerging right now. He says that the old story is the story of empire. The story of empire is with the organization of society through a hierarchy. He says it's a hierarchy built on violence. And it's a hierarchy that has held sway for at least the last 5,000 years, with the beginnings of the first civilizations. They built hierarchies. You know, we think of soldiers as being a permanent feature of our culture, but soldiers as a social category has only existed for the last 5,000 years. There was a time before there were any soldiers on earth. And David Corton, in The Great Turning, says that this story that has held sway for the last 5,000 years, right now, is shifting to the story of the earth and earth community. The earth community story, he said, is a life-centered, egalitarian and sustainable way of ordering human society based on the democratic principles of partnership. Joanna Macy says that the work of The Great Turning is built on three interrelated parts. And it's interesting that those people who've done dragon dreaming have learned to add a fourth part. So the first part, Joanna says, is the work of our hands. The work of our hands, she says, is holding actions in defense of the earth. These holding actions in defense of the earth are the blockades, the protests, the lobbying, the writing of letters, the signing of petitions to try to bring about a difference. These holding actions in defense of the earth are really important because they have the power to save lives. And not just save human lives, to save lives in the more than human world. For example, people here may know of the Australian koala. Now, there were 100,000 koalas burned in the bushfires that were in Australia this last summer. There may be only 10,000 koalas left in some states. But people are taking action in defense of the earth to protect the last remaining groups of koalas in Australia. Now, this holding actions in defense of the earth is necessary work, but it is not sufficient work. It's necessary, but the holding actions in defense of the earth is exhausting, and it frequently produces burnout. It needs a second dimension. And the second dimension, Joanna suggests, is work of the head. It's building new win-win-win institutions for the future. These are institutions for personal growth for the people involved. It's institutions that build a sense of community, and it's institutions that work in service to the earth, which are the three functions of dragon dreaming. And the interesting thing is that this is necessary work too, but it too is not sufficient, because this second kind of work can be co-opted by the same empire system of win-lose, the same system of profit system that the win-lose empire is based upon. And so Joanna says that there's a third kind of work for the Great Turning. And this third kind of work for the Great Turning, she says, is shifting consciousness in order to see with new eyes. This work, she suggests, is work of the heart. This too is necessary work, But again, it's not sufficient. It needs to be linked to the two others in effective action. Now, in Dragon Dreaming, we say there's a fourth kind of work. This is supporting ourselves and our communities while we make the necessary changes. While Dragon Dreaming projects often have only one or more of the other three of the external factors of the triangle, Dragon Dreaming training aims to strengthen the work at the center of this triangle to make a tetrahedron. So this is the work of the Great Turning. And Joanna suggests that we're living through the third Great Turning in the history of the Earth. The first Great Turning was when we ceased being hunters and gatherers and started being agriculturists and living in cities. October 2007 was an important date in the first Great Turning, because the United Nations says that that date, October 2007, was the date in which, for the first time, more than 50% of the world's population was living in a city of more than 1 million people. It's never happened before. So the first Great Turning has taken us 10,000 years. The second Great Turning, some people believe, began in about 1413 in the city of Sagres in southern Portugal. And there, a Portuguese prince brought together Arab, Christian, and Jew solid scholars and sailors together to build the best ships in the world at that time. And that began the scientific and technological revolution that we're still living through today. So that second Great Turning has taken us 600 years. Now, both the first and the second Great Turning depend on expansion. They depend on expansion because the empire depends on constant growth. If it doesn't keep growing, what happens is the people at the base of the social pyramid can't aspire to becoming middle class, and middle class can't aspire to becoming elite. And if it stops growing and starts collapsing, struggles inside the elite begin to consume themselves, and you go into a dark age. So those are the first two Great Turnings. Today we face a third Great Turning. And this third Great Turning is, how do we build a sustainable culture? How do we limit climate change? How do we limit the loss of biodiversity? How do we stop the massive extinction of species that's happening at the rate at the moment of 15 species per hour? How do we limit the polarization between rich and poor, so that at the moment there are 8 men who between them have a wealth greater than 50% of the world's population? So that's the third Great Turning. And we have a decade to bring that third Great Turning around. It's interesting that one of the people who've been talking most about the third Great Turning in a different way is a 16-year-old girl from Sweden, Greta Thunberg. And so she says that the way of bringing about this third Great Turning is by taking action. And Joanna's talk about the 3 steps of the Great Turning, the harnessing of the head, the heart, and the hands, provides us with the tools that we need to be able to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to bring it when we preparing for this again. I will share through the sutra. We made a sutra circle conversation space in which people can then later connect between and get the recordings of this video video, and I also made a PowerPoint and from our previous conversation, and you also will share the PowerPoint. So we'll do that. We'll have a conversation space. And well, something that came up, you were saying we will need everyone. We will need everyone, everyone, everyone. Can you speak on to which is this everyone, everyone, everyone?
Yes. I often say that this third great turning is going to take us all, but all to the power of 3. We currently have 7.6 billion people on the planet. And this third great turning won't leave any one of those 7.6 people out. It has to be something that we are all engaged in. So that's the first all. The second all is in this third great turning. It's going to take every skill that you possess, and even those skills that you don't know that you possess. It's going to take those parts of you that you don't even know that you don't know. So that is the second all. And the third all, it's going to take us harvesting the richness and the skills and the abilities of every culture that has existed on this planet. We need to harvest the skills of every culture and every civilization in making this third great turning. So this third great turning is a process that's going to take us all to the power of 3. It's the way in which I see it. We can't afford to leave anyone out, or any skill out, or any culture out. We need them all. 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 Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. And I just want to acknowledge that it's not easy. It's not easy to recognize that you have a gift. It's not easy to recognize yourself as one that can achieve greatness. You know, we tend to find heroes, even if it's Greta Thunberg, and it's not easy to become our self heroes. There is the voice in the head, and there is so many other structures that maybe prevent us.
Yeah, and this is the power of storytelling. You see, storytelling is the principal component of how we think, of how we speak, and how we make meaning of our lives. Storytelling mediates our social structures, and storytelling extends deep into our human ancestry. There's a wonderful book which I can recommend by a man called Brian Boyd. It's called On the Origin of Stories, Evolution, Cognition, and Fiction. And he shows how in human evolution, stories are probably the most efficient way of learning. It's a very, very strong way of sharing and remembering information. Stories are capable of retaining the attention of listeners. And stories build rapport, empathy, trust, and safety. And stories, by their very nature, create a community. Jane Goodall, the wonderful woman who studied chimpanzees at Comstream in Kenya. At Davos recently, she showed how storytelling helps people stay calm in times of emergency. And we are facing emergencies now, emergencies of COVID-19, emergencies of the climate, emergency of the climate catastrophe. And we need to be able to stay calm when faced with these emergencies. And stories help us to do that. And stories reach out to people who disagree with us. There's Elena Renkin.
That's a good point. I have a question about this coming out, and maybe Shula wants to bring about these people that disagree with us. She put a question in. Maybe you want to ask this, Shula.
Okay, thank you, Uri. Well, the question to John in particular, but to us all. I really resonate, first of all, with everything you're saying. We cannot leave anyone out. I've been living with this question, how on earth and in the sky world. So, John, how can we then include also those 8 richest men?
We can, but we've got to be careful. You see, there's about 3%, between 2 and 3% of the human population are psychopaths. Now, a psychopath, it's been found, a psychopath is literally a person who cannot feel empathy. To understand the nature of a psychopath, it's possible to see one on operation at the moment if you look at Donald Trump. They are obsessed about the idea of winning. And they blame the losers for losing. They bring about suffering of others in terms of trying to get their will, their way. And we need to be able to recognize the psychopath. Now, it's interesting that although psychopaths are less than 3%, unfortunately, it's about 4% for men and about 2% for women. But when we look at our structures of power at the moment, it's been found that between 20 and 30% of the chief executive officers of major corporations have psychopathic tendencies. A large percentage of politicians have psychopathic tendencies. The empire that David talks about, that hierarchical structure of power built on violence, has been built by psychopaths, and psychopaths are better able to work with that. One of the things I believe is that we are living right now, through the Great Turning, in an age of double power. Double power exists when the organizations and authorities that have all the power and all the legitimacy and all of the authority have a zero capacity to resolve problems. And the networks and the informal organizations and the non-government organizations and the others that have the capacity to solve the problems have no power, no legitimacy, and no authority. And double power situations like the one we're living through right now only last for a very short period of time. And it can go in one of 2 ways. One way is that we see a transfer of power from those organizations and institutions that have the power but no capacity to solve problems to the organizations and institutions that have the capacity to solve the problems. It can happen very fast. It's almost like a pre-revolutionary situation. The second possibility is that those organizations that have the power, legitimacy, and authority, but no capacity to solve problems, take control of the others. And if that happens, what we see is a societal collapse. And we head into a dark age. It's what Joanna Macy calls the Great Unraveling. So the way to actually build the relationship, even those 8 men, they're not all psychopaths. In fact, most people, most of the time, want to do good, but they just don't know how to do it. So it's a question of telling a story that touches the heart, even of those 8. And if we can find that story and share that story widely, we can see a very rapid change in finding the solutions to our problems right now. That is the task that we're being asked to. This is what we're being called to do right now. And the way in which the stories can touch their heart. There's a woman called Elena Rankin who's been studying what happens neurologically when we're hearing stories. When we hear a story, our palms sweat more. Our eye blink rate increases and our facial expression shifts. The eyebrow muscles are activated. The eyebrows tend to raise and fall more rapidly. These are all signs of engagement. Looking inside the brain, when we hear a story, the linguistic temporal lobe and the emotional limbic system and the sensory and motor cortex activity is happening to reinforce behaviors. It actually increases the mirror neurons in our brain, and it synchronizes the brain waves between the teller of the story and the audience. So this is a part of the power of storytelling. There's another book I'd recommend for people, and I'll send you in my PowerPoint that accompanies my talk here, the PowerPoint on this, and you'll be able to see all the references I'm giving. It's a book by Jonathan Gottschall, and it's a book called The Storytelling Animal. And he shows that we as human beings are wired up for stories. Stories actually help us navigate social issues, like a flight simulator helps you navigate flying a plane. Stories actually prepare us for difficult situations. They can change the world for better, and they can build common values. We shape the stories, but at the same time, the stories shape us. And the stories can shape us both for good, but also the stories can shape us for bad. This is the power of storytelling.
Yeah, thank you. Shula, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you, John. Lots to respond to, but I don't want to take up airtime here. It'd be lovely to hear more voices. It's just such good food.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I came to think about maybe that's the thing we're trying to heal, the psychopath, the psychopath, and I feel a lot of diseases, especially mental diseases. We classify them now. We give them names. In ancient times, they were being held in a very different way. That the disease is a sign of something in society that is wrong, and our capacity to handle our health, individual and collective health, and how we manage that.
And how do we need the psychopath?
Yeah.
What is the wisdom of the psychopath?
Yeah, I can share my experience. I had a life experience of being a soldier. As you said, the institution that did not exist 5,000 years ago. And I feel being trained as a soldier is basically being trained as a psychopath in an organized way. And I feel the sort of separation that comes with it, the sort of separating from the shared experience somehow, to allow me to do two things that I'm not programmed to do: go endanger my life for an order, and kill another human being on an order. And to do that, and I feel that's true for everyone, you need to be trained to not, because it goes against your programming. So I wonder if this could be an information on how psychopaths are created or why.
They found, in fact, that the studies of psychopathy, and there have been a lot of studies of psychopathy, another two books. There's the book, I haven't got the authors, I'm afraid. One called The Wisdom of the Psychopath, and the other one called The Science of Evil. And it suggests that psychopaths, in fact, have two characteristics. One is genetic, and one is environmental. And the studies show that psychopaths have a specific gene. It's called the MAOAL gene. It stands for the monoamine oxidase low. It means that they have difficulty metabolizing dopamine in the brain. And dopamine is linked to the behavior associated with risk-taking. So that's one of the characteristics that psychopaths tend to have. The second one is that psychopaths, there's a thing called bonding. And bonding is the way in which you build a bond between yourself and your primary caregiver. And one of the characteristics of bonding is actually linked to storytelling. There's a number of characteristics of effective bonding. But when they study people who are psychopaths, they find that people who are psychopaths have a cold relationship with their primary caregiver in childhood. And psychopaths seem to need these two characteristics. And when they've actually studied the neurology of psychopaths, they find that there is that the brain of a psychopath is different than the brain of a normal person. The brain of a psychopath tends to have a weak connection between the amygdala of the brain and the prefrontal cortex. Now, the amygdala of the brain is the part of the brain that processes fear. It's linked to survival. And psychopaths generally tend to have a reduced fear. They tend to be more fearless than the average population. The prefrontal cortex is where we process the ability to be able to curtail and reduce our feeling of anger. The prefrontal cortex gives us the ability not to react to powerful emotions and to rationally think things through. And what they found with psychopaths is that they're able to react much faster than the average person in terms of emotional processing in this way, and particularly in the inability to feel the empathy that the normal person feels, the ability to have a feeling of remorse or shame or guilt. Psychopaths don't feel remorse. They don't feel shame. They don't feel guilt. Psychopaths too can be superficially charming. But when you work with psychopaths over a long period of time, what people discover is that the people who are working with them are in fact seen as instrumental to the satisfaction and the gratification of the psychopath. There's been some really interesting research done on the evolution of the human. If you look at the size of the human brain, it is so big and so complex compared to the brain of our immediate ancestors, an animal that resembled a chimpanzee. And the thing about humans that characterizes us more than anything else is our ability for cooperation. Our ability, we evolved as an animal that practices food sharing. We are naturally altruistic, but our altruism is reciprocated and reciprocal. But what happens is that if you are a psychopath, you're able to use others for your own gratification. And so the psychopath would, evolutionarily speaking, have more children. And so you'd expect the psychopathic proportion in the community to grow through natural selection. But at the same time as that, if we can evolve to be more intelligent, to recognize psychopaths when they appear, and if we can find ways of limiting the power of psychopaths when they appear, we will leave more children. And so what scientists think is that these two factors act like a ratchet to constantly increase the size of the human brain. If you look at the way in which the human brain has evolved over the last 2 million years, for 2 million years, up to about 40,000 years ago, every generation had 125,000 more brain cells than their parents. Every generation for 2 million years. That is an incredible speed of evolution. And it seems that this race between altruists and psychopaths may have been the motor that drove this evolution. Because over the 2 million years of that evolution, it wasn't technology that changed. It was our social capacities that changed. It's a very interesting nature of the way in which our cultures need psychopaths, as well as the way in which our cultures have needed altruists. We need both. It has propelled our evolution in the direction it's taken. That's made us human. But we need to limit psychopaths to that 3%. Because unfortunately, if the psychopaths take over, well, you can see what's happening in the United States at the moment. They're saying 100,000 people a day will catch COVID-19. And it's already over 2.5 million people in the United States out of the 10 million people on Earth who've got COVID-19. That's one of the things about having a psychopathic leader.
So yeah, I feel there is a lot of thing to chew on, and I want to read a little bit of the comments and then maybe send us very shortly for breakout rooms to share a little bit. And I feel there is so much more to explore here, but I'll just read some comments that before Alan was writing. In a true democracy among an informed citizenry, we would recognize psychopaths and not put them into positions of decision-making authority. And I'm telling stories that touches the heart of those 8. Healing is placing love where there is hurt. Along the premise, what if we just love those that do not know how to do different? What if we just cease to judge others as much as we judge ourselves? This is Marcello. Alan, going radically local with food, finance, medicine, etc., has the potential to end revenue streams that allow the uber-rich to exert influence on our political and economic systems. Yes, Marcella. Sai. Question: is the psychopath, mental health, and all other spheres of health due to the current vibrations and story? In my army basic training, part of our training included our screaming out, kill, kill, kill. Alan, Ravi, Stuart Brown. Interesting aspects of Stuart Brown about science. A play as covers some interesting aspects. Shula, my thought, what you shared from your training as a soldier, being forced to kill and let yourself be killed. This is a story, a strand that goes through all mythologies, and the sacrificial death honorable deaths, if we feel we need to look at that strand and see how it's metamorphosed in current of evolution of human consciousness. And Marcelo, nice to be with you. CB, you have been told a story, a scarcity and survival story. You have been told a story about the being human is. We have socially been traumatized to behave in a way to attain what we've been told to need and value within our culture. People are disconnected from gratification of community, nature, creativity, and replace all with growth, profit, wealth, reconnect people to the care of love with different needs and values. Remember that everyone is the hero in their own story, trying to help themselves or their friend, family. So I also remember talking with you, John. I always remember those things that are necessary for a transformative event. But and every time I ask you, you give me a different answer also. But I remember the last part, which is committing for action. And we have about 20 minutes. And I feel, I just want to invite us to do 10 minutes of just being connected with that, like everything we heard here. And then I'll create breakout rooms in which you can find yourself with another human being. Hopefully it's not a psychopath. And there we can share from the not knowing, from what is alive at us right now, you know, listening to all what we have heard now. How can we, what could be an action we can commit? You know, because this can look very big, very difficult to achieve. But what could be an action I can achieve right now with the people I know, the networks that I know? What can I do? And then we can have a sharing of that in the bigger group. And try to keep it short because we have a short time. But so I'll create this. And John, will you be joining a room also? And Hector. So I'll create 10 rooms. So you be 3 or 4 people and try to kind of have at least 1 minute each in that room to think and feel what is the action I want to commit to following this conversation. Okay, if you prefer not to join the room, you can stay here as well and share it in the chat if you wish. So it's going to be 5 minutes, 1 minute each. Hello, Soili. You are having problems? You managed, or you prefer to stay here? Oh. Oh.
Unfortunately, my person wasn't there.
Okay, I can send you to another room if you wish.
Yeah.
Let me find you first. Richard.
Richard and Melissa, I'm called.
Okay, I'll move you to another room. Moving you to another room. Yes. If you are having troubles to get into a room, I can send you.
Can you move me to some room, because there was a screen like some description and I cannot see the other people.
Okay, now I'll try to move you to another room. Do you see that?
No.
Because I already assigned you to a room. Do you see some breakout room option? Or we can do it here if you wish. We are.
Yeah, why not?
You want to go? We're 3 people here. So.
We are like a small room ourselves.
Yes.
We don't need to go anywhere.
You want to start, Daria? There's some noise on your side, but
I don't know, it's quite quiet at my side.
yeah, it could be some disturbance, electronic disturbance. But yeah, I can start and say my commitment is to show more care in my relationship and pay more attention to when I'm being a psychopath. And sometimes I can be. A psychopath for me, in that sense, is not noticing other people. So being more caring.
Nice, thank you. I can go. My commitment is to come back to the senses, the Pinakari. So much of everything in this summit just comes to that of what I am experiencing. So my commitment is for myself to come there and to share that as well, to share these techniques to come to that.
Thank you.
We have some noise, I think, but I don't know why, but maybe you can say anything. Yeah?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but there is some disturbance. Maybe it's like a phone nearby or something else, like a TV or...
The phone in the room.
I don't know. It's okay.
Well, if you can bear with it and listen, I will be short. My commitment is to express myself more as what I have learned and the experience that I gained through last years. I feel it's a turning point to bring it out and share with others. And I don't, like, I see some of the actions that I can do clearly. Some are like, yeah, maybe something here, maybe something there. But the commitment is to keep doing that and keep sharing.
Yeah, thank you. And the noise went down, so it's great. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think some people found themselves in bigger rooms, some in smaller rooms. Some people found themselves in the big room here. So I hope you had an okay experience and you all managed to share. And if you were not being able to share, that's your time before other people. Did you all manage to share in your group? Yeah. And if you want to share also in the writing in the chat, something that you heard or something that you said that you feel is a good idea to inspire other people in terms of a commitment for action, we're going to have everybody. So I write from art plus more caring express. So, hello everyone. I hope you had a good experience in your room. I know some of you have been in bigger rooms, some of you with just one person, some people, we were creating a room here. So I just wonder if you want to share in the chat or unmuting some idea that you can share that you feel, oh, this is something I heard or I propose that I really want to share with a big group as an idea of what we can commit to in terms of action. Just in the chat, or if you wish to unmute yourself and share that, that's the good time.
Uri, can you let me know who was the person in Lisbon that I was in the chat room with?
Yeah,
because I want to send him some document.
It was me. It was me.
Yes.
Yes, I want to send you some more information on that, what I was talking about.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, and just to say, we have the Sutra Circle, and you can find each other there, hopefully. And if you have troubles, I'll just ask me, and I'll try to connect you with the people in the room. And yeah, anything you want to share from the experience? I know it was very short. Yeah, Kim.
Thank you. Hello from sunny Scotland. And I'd just like to share something more about a thing for people to hear about that I was wondering if John and yourself had heard of, to do with sociocracy, and also looking at the work that's happening. I know that Ted Rao is part of also the organising or hosting or doing some work within this collective, and so sociocracy for all, as well as the other kind of toolkits, because I'm feeling that that's where the heart, the head and the hand and kind of the things that John was talking about really does resonate in there. And so also John Buck's Bossa Nova is showing how toolkits, like bringing things together that you look at and they align. So I would bring that into conversation as possible, of where you can also place your thought and action as well.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, anyone else want to share something from their conversation that they came up with and feel can inspire others as we move forward in this moment of time? Or you have a question, also a question, it's open question.
I can just share from our group. It was so beautiful to be in the room with Venita and Carrie, and to share the space and time together in our curiosity and interest in storytelling, and feeling more empowered to be storytellers ourselves, to step into our full storyteller capacity.
Thank you, Manuela. We are all storytellers.
I would also love to share with you, and thanks for this amazing chat with Martin and Shanti. And just very quickly, what is bringing me to this summit, coming from the transformation conflict transformations, I mean, is the project that we are building in Portugal to bring a new village, a new eco village, where 100 families can live together. And we are on the first moment trying to get the community, and I'm leading one of the neighborhoods, and I'm an artist and also a therapist, and I'm trying to bring my community with young people, but it's this moment of inviting people and getting everyone and even me motivated, to bring everyone in building a completely new way of living. It goes from rethinking politics, economy, science, and religion, and how to bring spiritual in everyone together. So I want to thank John and all of you for providing this space, because I'm really discovering how the world is made by stories and not atoms. Just so I think it's the power of the story. And today I'm going to write to everyone this invite of what we are projecting, and to see who's really into it. So thank you all for anything you can give as an inspiration. Even more, I'm just here to listen, and hope that soon we will have this project as something really happening, and then we can chat in here and show you this is our village, and I'll be talking from there. So yeah, thank you all for this, and it's good to let you know what we're doing here. We're really trying to build a new way of living as best as we can. Gosh.
Good luck.
Yeah. Hector, yes.
Oh, it's so many things happening, but storytelling is perhaps the new word that we used to call myth. Myth had those two meanings of the myth and the telling of the myth, the growing of the myth. In our group, we talk about something you mentioned at the beginning, John, is that we all carry gifts. We all carry medicine for the world. We are living in a liminal moment of this rite of passage into the great journey. The old world no longer exists, and it should not exist. It's collapsing. But the new world is being born through us, is coming through, is emerging through us. And there is an urgent need because there is a lot of fear. There is an urgent need for mentors and elders and for people who can hold a story that is bigger than what is happening right now. Stories are also storehouses of what has happened in the past. Humanity has been here before in a different way. Imagine people at World War II, etc. The world was collapsing completely. So I love that you mentioned that, and I would like to bring us back whenever possible to the role of mentors and the role of elders and the role of people who can hold that vision, like Joanna Macy, like you, John, and the enormous importance of that in this moment for humanity.
Thank you, Hector, and thank you for bringing this and being a mentor myself, as Hector is my mentor, big mentor of mine in. And I wonder if, yeah, we are in the final 5 minutes. I just want to say that we're recording all of this. We'll share it on the Sutra, we'll share the PowerPoint, and we'll hopefully get to connect with each other more. If there is something you want to maybe share, a word or a sentence, and then we move to John for a closing. And saying that this can continue, that the aim with ImaginAction is to create more conversations. We have next week a conversation about ecopsychology, and we want to create more opportunities to hear wisdom and to connect as at this time. So, yeah, anything else that you feel that really needs to come out right now? That's your chance. Then in voice or in chat. And yes, Virgilio.
Just wanted to resonate with what Hector was bringing, and the idea of griots. Griots are the storytellers in African villages, and they basically tell the story of whatever happens in the village, and in that way they preserve culture, values, and habits. And if you are born into a griot family, you are a griot as well. So that means that your grandfather was a griot and your dad was a griot. So there's a whole kind of a professional pathway to become storytellers. And they do it in many different ways. So by sitting people around the fire to tell stories, but also by creating songs. So I think there's a role for songwriters, for people who use arts to express themselves, to tell stories in different ways and become the modern griots.
Thank you, Virgilio. That's that's a beautiful vision that we hope to co-create together. The modern griot. And
all of us.
Yes, all of us. We are all the modern griot. I'm developing an app I will share about in the Sutra. If you want to test it, it's a storytelling app. And hopefully we can share stories and be storytellers. Maybe that's what we need. I want to bring it back to John to close us off, and just to thank him again for his wisdom and time. It's late, it's getting late in Perth, and
yes.
And we'll just kind of for final words, and obviously deep gratitude from all of us.
Yes, I'd like to thank Hector for talking about the nature of myth. Because myth, in the modern world, we think of myth as being not true. But in Greek, myth actually means truth. Mythos means truth. And there's a website that I can highly recommend for everyone to have a look at. It's called, www.ageoftransition.org, transformation. And it talks about ways of thinking for the transition that we're going through. And he suggests that there is in fact 4 different steps. And it's interesting how these 4 steps relate to the 4 steps of dragon dreaming. The first one is the step of mythos. This is like the dreaming stage in dragon dreaming. Mythos is symbolic. It's the domain of the epic story. It engages the imagination and creative practices. It's about making of meaning. So that's the first step. The second step is the step of episteme. Episteme is the rational domain. It's the domain of holistic sciences, collaborative inquiry, adaptive social learning. It is the step that takes information into understanding. That's the second step. The third step is something that Uri has been talking about already. The third step is techne. It's the instrumental, it's the domain of earth-centric technologies, ecological economics and governance. It's about ways of doing things. And the fourth step is psyche. This is the existential realm. It's the domain of earth-centered consciousness, ecosystem feedbacks, and heart connections. It's the step of recovering wisdom. And so these 4 steps, mythos, episteme, techne, and psyche, can be seen as the way of building the story. Your story. Each person here is a story. And it's the story of how do you become the hero of your own life. And in that heroic journey that you're being called upon to undertake right now, a resource that is available to you is the story of the hero of 1,000 faces of Joseph Campbell. The story of the heroic quest. Because every skill that you possess is the result of a project you've done in this lifetime. And your life is the ultimate story. And so finding a way of telling your story as an empowerment that helps bring about the changes that you want to see in the world. That's the challenge that we're being given right now. We are here not by accident. We are the people that we've been waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And just to mention again that we'll be creating this sutra space and sharing the recordings and the PowerPoint. Also saying that some of you registered, and we're speaking about this being a webinar and a series of webinars going with a balance point. So you can find your balance point and give value to it. You can do it through, when you entering the sutra space, you would be able to do it through your Stripe, or you can do it via the ImaginAction website support. Or you can do it in other ways, and you can contact me directly if you have difficulties. We have a message from Priyanka from India, I imagine, that wants to share something. Please.
Thank you so much, Uri, for connecting and creating the space. John inspired me to speak, especially the last few paragraphs. Actually, like it inspired me to talk a little bit about my work, because one of the way how I we all, some of us are coming from the space of theater of the oppressed. And I try to take theater of the oppressed a little bit into storytelling. And John right now spoke about myth. Hector also spoke about myth. What I do is in my work, I try to see resonances with folk tales, myths, legends around the world with my own personal story. Because what is truly personal will definitely be universal. So I don't know which way it goes. Is it my story that is inspiring the new folktales that is going to be created? Or is it the folktales or myths that is impacting my story? But what I try to do is I try to find resonances and myth, my personal story and myth. I try to sandwich it. Ask the audience, can you see there is a change that I can really bring in my story? Because sometimes we as storytellers, we feel we are not the change agent. We are not having the authority of our own story. We feel helpless. And that moment might be, I'm not able to change my story at that moment, but I can change the age-old tale, the traditional tale, depending on the input that is received from the audience. And it's amazing because what happens is, last week, I shared a story about my mother and how she stopped singing because of certain kind of chemistry in the house. And the audience changed my story. And the audience changed the myth, rather. The audience didn't change my story. But what happened was my mother heard me telling the story. And she actually started singing. She actually started playing harmonium once again. So it's amazing what you right now said, John, because I absolutely resonate with that. The power of myth and the power of truly universal and the power of truly personal. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Priyanka. And just to recognize also, we're doing was a workshop with Angelo about myth and the hero's journey with ImaginAction. And another one is going on right now about unlocking our dreams. We're finishing it, and we are hoping to propose more of that and bringing in more new artists. Maybe Priyanka, you want to join us and create a network of ImaginActioners and griots, modern griots that share and co-create this knowledge together and for the future. And again, once again, thank you to John and everyone here. Actually, maybe we can just open our mics and kind of salute everyone and say thank you. And just to say that the Conflict Transformation Summit is going on all the time, and there are many spaces. There is a community cafe, and there are many spaces there to connect, and I'm very inviting you to connect with that. And we can open our mics.
Just before people say goodbye,
yes, John.
I want to thank you, Yuri, for bringing us together. I want to celebrate the work that you've done behind the scenes that's made this possible and made it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you, John, as always. Thank you for the spirit in our conversation.
You give your gifts to the world. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Toda rabba. Thank you. You can say thank you in your own language also.
Thank you. Buongiorno. Grazie.
Bye.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Missing
you, baby.
A bientôt.
Grazie.
Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Salud. Hmm.